Logan chimes in, are they going to be a playoff team in the future? I think I'm deciphering that correctly, Logan, that is Iowa going to be a playoff team in the future? Is that a realistic annual expectation, or kind of how do we feel about that on an annual basis? I think that, look, in a 12-team playoff and a 12-team playoff, Chris, that, oh, by the way, might be expanding in the next, I don't know how many years, within short order, you could be looking at a 14-team playoff. And I hope at some point we say, you know what, 16's enough, and this doesn't turn into March Madness, and all of a sudden you've got 32 college football playoff teams getting in. I mean, I do think to some degree keeping a level of exclusivity is important for college football, and to keep the importance of the college football playoff. I think at some point you got to cap it, right? But long story short is this thing is not getting, they're not reducing college football playoff bids. They're going to probably add college football playoff bids. I think every year you should go into the season and feel like there's no reason we can't be one of the 12 best teams and getting into the college football playoff. Iowa hasn't been to a college football playoff yet. Obviously, it has only been a 12-team format for the one season. This will be the second year of that. But I think that is a realistic expectation. There's no reason you can't be one of the 4 best teams in the Big Ten. And on a lot of years, if you're one of the top 4 teams in the Big Ten, I think you're going to the college football playoff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think last time I saw something on the expansion, I might have saw 16. It could be 14, could be 16. I know for sure that's a serious thing that they're talking about upstairs in the committee. But you got to feel good if our defense could be anything kind of similar to what it was the past couple of years, minus all the losses. And if our offense could really be what can elevate to a level we kind of expect them to, you got to feel good about our chances of being a top 4 team in the Big Ten, having a chance at making the college football playoff. And if we do expand to 16, you got to feel good about that too. I truly believe if we have a 12-team format 2 years ago and we went 10-2, I'll forever say should have been 11-1. I think we could have made the college football playoff if it was a 12-team format. So I'm going to take my chances. I feel strongly about this team, especially about the offense. I think very highly of it. And you do got Aiden saying, defense doesn't look very strong. I feel good in, the defensive development of what we've been able to show throughout the past couple of years or even decade. So, I don't think we'll take that far back of a step. I'm taking my chances,
I would imagine that Phil Parker is pretty motivated for this defense to get back into that top 10, top 5 nationally, total yards. The passing defense, the secondary took a legitimate step backwards last year for Iowa. So, and there's reasons to be uncertain about what that group's going to look like. We talked earlier today in Iowa Hawkeyes Primetime Live that corner, safety, if you can get secondary help, that would be good news for Hawkeye fans to go ahead and add and supplement the defensive backfield. So there's reasons to have some questions about the defense. Iowa is linked to defensive backs Gavin Edwards from North Greenville, or if it makes you feel better to hear maybe a program you're more familiar with in Austin Peay. He did spend this spring at Austin Peay before jumping back into the portal. Gavin Edwards, that is. Shaheed Barrows, South Dakota defensive back. He is visiting Iowa. So the Hawkeyes are linked and in the mix for defensive back help. So that is a legitimate question. Linebacker, look, you're replacing great linebackers in Jay Higgins, in Nick Jackson. That is a ton of production that Iowa has to replace there. But the one thing I would say to your remark, Aiden, is the defensive line. I think you feel really good about what the Hawkeyes have up front. And if you've got a great defensive line, Chris, that can solve maybe some issues you got going on behind it.
Of course. If you're able to hinder the run game, we've seen it in whether it's college football, NFL, a team that's hot in the run game opens up almost everything on offense. If we have a strong defensive line to hold the run game to, a certain amount of yards or just certain yards per carry, you know that a team's going to have to be a little more reliant on the pass. That way it's easier to adjust. It's easier to plan for that. And I think, it starts up front. It starts in the trenches. And even though we're losing arguably the best linebacker Iowa's ever had, definitely one of the best, and even Nick Jackson, just a very dominant player himself, that's going to be very, very tough to replace. But if that D line could hold up and be just as good as last year or even years prior, our defense could be what it used to be. It could be. And I do want to say, even though we took a step back defensively last year, by no means were we a mediocre defensive team. We were still, a top 20, 30 defensive team in the country, I believe. We just weren't a top 5 like we're accustomed to. So still pretty good numbers. And if we could stay in the top 20, even get to the top 15, top 10, again, 10, 11 wins I see in the future.
The conversation would probably be a lot different for some in the Iowa fan base if you didn't have the series of double-figure blown leads from a season ago, and everybody's hands were dirty in that. The defense's hands were dirty. Well, really mostly offense, defense, but probably the special teams units you could mix them into. I'm thinking mostly the main offensive and defensive units. Some culpability, big time culpability in blowing some games a season ago. So if the defense had locked down a couple of those games, then maybe Aiden wouldn't feel the way that he does. But hey, that's a discussion for another day, and it's a legitimate discussion of, hey, does that worry you a little bit about how this season shapes up for the Hawkeyes? Poor clock management on my behalf, Chris. I will try to manage the football game more effectively in the weeks to come here, but we do need to mention, man, big news for Ben McCollum. He lands a big fish. Alvaro Folgueiras, a Spaniard, was the Horizon League Player of the Year from Robert Morris. Inked, signed, sealed, delivered. There's no discussion, no ands, ifs, or buts about it. He is an Iowa Hawkeye, a big-time addition for Iowa. The, again, reigning Horizon League Player of the Year, Alvaro Folgueiras. He signed with Iowa. He committed late last night and signed with Iowa today. A 6'9" forward. The thought is he's going to be kind of your traditional stretch four, Chris. Averaged 14.1 points per game, 9.1 rebounds, shot north of 54% from the field a season ago, was a great three-point shooter with volume from beyond the arc. So this is not, hey, he shot 15 three-pointers over the course of last season. No, he's going to stretch the floor, he's going to space the floor, and he can knock it down and rip the cords from downtown for Ben McCollum and company. A 41.3% three-point shooter a season ago. Good free throw shooter. That's important when you're talking about trying to lock down games late. So the Spaniard, Mr. Folgueiras, welcome to Iowa City, and get ready to learn black and gold, baby.
And what a big-time pickup, man. This is a second pickup in the transfer portal that's not from Drake. I believe Brennan Hausen was the first one. But now you got the two guys we got are sharpshooters. Like you said, 41% from three. And this guy also averaged over a block and a steal a game. So he has some defensive versatility to him. And, I believe he was a freshman last year. So he's coming in with a couple years of eligibility left. And like it says on the bottom, he's from DME Academy. Please, someone correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the last two players that we've gotten from DME Academy went to the NBA. I think it was Chris and Keegan Murray. Please, so if I'm wrong, please tell me that in the comments. But I will say there's a lot of potential with him. He could be a key player on offense next year. And for us, we needed someone in the portal. We've been we lacked shooting. It was pretty obvious we lacked shooting last year. And we lacked offensive versatility at the big, besides, having Owen Freeman who could get it done inside. No one can get it done outside in terms of bigs. So to have someone to stretch the floor and play a more modern style of what today's game should be like, this is a very, very good pickup for Ben McCollum early in his career. Team shaping out to be pretty good.
Here, speaking of Ben McCollum, here's what Ben had to say. First-year Hawkeye head coach on Alvaro Folgueiras. Alvaro is an extremely versatile player. He shoots at a high clip, is super competitive, and has won. We value winning. On top of that is his ability to pass the ball and trigger offense, which is what we needed. We're excited. Alvaro is a Hawkeye. And I know that Hawkeye fans are excited that Folgueiras is a Hawkeye. Big-time shooter, legitimate scorer, will take some pressure off Bennett Sturts, who doesn't have to do everything alone. And the Hawkeyes aren't done. They're linked to Kennard Davis Jr., who, oh, by the way, Ben McCollum knows well, because guess what? He scored 20-plus with Southern Illinois last season versus Drake. Drake won both of those games, by the way, versus the Salukis. But Kennard Davis, who has been another guard that has been linked to Iowa, well, that's somebody that McCollum knows well, and hopefully that bodes well for the Hawkeyes in the transfer portal recruitment right there. They're not done. That brings us up to, I think, 8-9 names for Iowa basketball that we know that they've added. I think they're still searching for a legitimate true 5, Chris, but man, Ben McCollum he's done a really good job shaping this thing up for his first season, and again, providing excitement for Hawkeye fans, which has been sorely missing.
Mm-hmm. Of course, and you know what, the way it's shaping out to be is seeming like a 4-guard, one big lineup, something that's pretty quick and pretty versatile and could, 5 guys to stretch out the floor. We definitely need a true big. That is something that we do lack. Having an Owen Freeman in this case, if we were able to retain him, would be pretty nice for this lineup. Obviously he went to Creighton, but if we can get a player kind of the likes of him, it's always nice to, as much as it's nice to stretch the floor, it's always nice to have that player that can get it done inside and to create constant pressure on the inside. Alvaro seems like a guy that, will probably be more on the outside in the perimeter and, could be a pick and roll, a dominant pick and roll duo with Bennett Sturts. I'm excited to see what that looks like. And to have another guard, like the guy you just said, who's, could be another option for us. Be very good to have guard versatility. It's kind of a guard-driven game these days, but we need that big. And I'm sure Ben McCollum's doing his homework, and I fully trust in him getting that piece soon.
I hope that Iowa's just being crafty about this deal with Brendan Howson. Even in their signing release for Alvaro Folgueiras, they didn't mention Brendan Howson's name. So I'm going to be optimistic that this is just waiting for the right moment to have the official announcement for the Kansas State sharpshooter. But that is like, come on, make the announcement. You're starting to make me nervous by not having officially announced him.
Yeah, heart shaking, man. We need shooting, and we need a guy like him who was lighting up the Big 12 last year. We need him. So fingers crossed, man. But I got faith, man. If he's committed, he's committed. So Ben McCollum, man, we got to hurry up on that one. We want to see him. We need him.